Welcome back, everybody. DJ Vader with you. Back to the Martini Lounge inside the mix. I've got Vader here with us. And Vader, thanks for joining us on the channel.
Absolutely my pleasure, man.
Are you from Champaign, or where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Chicago, though Champaign's like a second home to me. My family's been living down here since the early 1900s, so Champaign is just as much home. It's just 2 hours south.
So was that your first gig in the 1900s?
Oh, goodness, I wish. Would have been a lot simpler, man.
So give us a little history of, like, a first memory you have of DJing. I mean, a couple records you might have dropped, or just the anxiety of it, just the first memory.
The first memory I really have of anything surrounding DJ culture was probably watching my cousin teach me how to spin a 15-second loop, basically 2 disco records on a break, back and forth on his turntables in my grandmother's basement. He was a guy that, you know, basically exposed me to a lot of the culture, and watching how fast his hands moved, I kept thinking to myself, I was like, I can't do that. And, you know, I find myself nearly 30 years later being able to do it. So.
Yeah, now it's a second, it's like probably just reflex.
Yeah, almost. It's one of those weird muscle memories. Sort of.
Yeah. What advice would you have maybe for a 13, 14-year-old kid in his bedroom that's probably got some skills and wants to get out there and play? Like, what would you say to yourself to get out there and get going? And
all the inspirations and better ghosts you have listened to with respect to DJing or music otherwise will tell you that there are a bunch of steps missing in between. That suddenly you go from being a sensation known only to yourself and perhaps close people to something that is an undeniable force basically in whatever music you choose. There's a bunch of steps in between, and one of the most humbling ones is playing to an empty room. It's going to happen a bunch. You're going to play to places where people don't necessarily understand the music. You're going to get a shit ton of bad requests. You're going to get dissatisfied with it. You're going to be looking at other people's equipment. But the thing about it is that skills speak. So if you hone what you're interested in and turn it into what you're good at, it makes such a difference in being able to appreciate a level of skill with respect to this art that's behind DJing. It's not just throwing records around, but if you develop that within yourself, you'll discover that all of those steps you were suspecting that you were missing on the in-between, you're not losing on anything, you're winning in terms of experience.
Good advice. I've actually taken that now. That's advice for me. You know, I have a couple years experience, but hey, every day's a new day.
Amen.
Have you ever been to a gig or found yourself in a situation where you didn't understand the equipment or the environment wasn't perfect, and how did you overcome that?
I've gotten to gigs where they said, we thought you were bringing the PA. Worse yet, I've gotten to places where I'm getting ready to start, the announcer has announced me, and I flip the crossfader over and it's dead air. And I'm looking at the record's playing, you know, and if I have like a digital audio workstation in front of me, I'm looking at the DAW and everything looks okay. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing wrong here? There's that moment of, you know, sort of forcing yourself to have to step back and make some degree of contemplation as to, this is what I know how to do. This is where what I know how to do fits into this situation. And saying to yourself over and over again, it's like, I can fix this. And you know how, even reciting that as a mantra for like, you know, the next 15 seconds to just figure it out, you'll fix it. Then your song will drop and the crowd will be like, oh, okay, you were fooling us, sure. And if you cannot fix it, there is somebody nearby. There always is. And it's in those moments you learn the art of covering for yourself. Whereas, like, there's always a backup that you should have. There's always something to fall back on.
Or at the very least, be prepared. Because you got to think that maybe to show up early. Set up early.
Yep, show up. And, like, my thing is that I show up. If I know the sound folks, I talk to them. If I don't know them, I introduce myself. I say, is there anything you know about the system here that I should know? Anything you quirks you know with respect to your equipment? Okay, no. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. Let's have an excellent show tonight. Let me know if you need anything from me. So all of that effort put forth shows sound men who are often the most stepped on class inside a club, because everybody gets mad at the sound man or sound woman or sound person first, even though it may be something that they are not necessarily controlling. So making that introduction, or, you know, building that bridge is very, very important.
And just one more time to pass it off to my camera guy. Mr. Nate Wells. Nate, any questions you can think of?
Take a while.
Where do you see, at least in Chicago, the most culture burgeoning in the spaces of, the youth or young adults?
Wow, that's a great question. Chicago has always been a place of strange cultural conflict. As a city that has been noted over and over again to be divided by such unobtrusive objects as freeways and train tracks in order to separate classes of people, cultures grew up differently in these two places. When suddenly, in the late 1970s to 1980s, these kids in these majority white neighborhoods were hearing about this place called the Warehouse, or places like that, or we're first hearing the name Frankie Knuckles, or we're hearing the names Little Lewis, or people like that. This was something they had not experienced. They had always been told that the culture on this side or this other side of things was so dangerous and raw and untouched and untouchable, because the people were viewed as such. But again, Chicago, in its interest to sort of break its own borders while reinforcing them at the same time, gentrification becomes an engine, and all of a sudden cultures have to get rolled into other neighborhoods. So you watch these maps shift and push themselves. And nowadays you have such a charge being led by organizations like Young Chicago Authors or BYP 100, where not only are they leading the movements with respect to liberation, these are the camps from where the artists are emerging in Chicago. And it's literal, like, minor degrees of separation. Chance the Rapper is somebody whose name is on everybody's lips right now. One of his understudies is Saba, a great rapper from the West Side, and he was part of Young Chicago Authors, who throws Louder Than a Bomb in the City, the Teen Poetry Festival. So it's all of this interconnectedness that's sort of rearing its head again and saying, let's make some great art happen. The problem is with Chicago is that in the interest of breaking down those borders, now comes the other half of reinforcing them. You're taking cultural standards and places that have existed and spaces that have existed in Chicago, and you're tearing them apart for the sake of what's being referred to as affordable real estate. Mm-hmm. So there's this giant brick wall in the way that is being chipped at and yet built back up stronger with every generation of culture that rolls through Chicago. And now some of these kids that are DJing and rapping and writing graph and breaking in the city are just incredible. And all they want to do is for this art to be heard, expressed, and cherished. And you have, this push to try and say this, like, okay, but we have to be able to market it as opposed to just letting it exist upon its own. And that's one of the biggest conflicts that exists there right now, and one of the most beautiful parts of what's breaking down the conflict at the same time.
Nice. Well, hey, I just want to take a minute to say thanks to Vader. Hopefully you guys got some good advice and some good feedback. It means a lot that you joined us on the channel.
Thank you for having me. Ladies and gentlemen, you are now in the court of the one true nerd king, otherwise known as DJ Vader, broadcasting to you from someplace in Southern Illinois, as opposed to my comfortable spot on that little moon orbiting the forest moon of Endor. Right now, you need to be supporting Martini Lounge and my brother DJ Vader. Subscribe to the channel, watch the videos over and over again, play them for your dogs, your parents at your bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs. And remember, kids, Dark Side's just a little bit more fun than that Jedi bullshit.